morning, guys. This morning we're going to talk about, we've been talking a lot about crazy Democrats and out there conducting an insurrection in the Civil War. Today we're going to shift the topic a little bit. We're going to talk about crazy Democrats doing crazy political maneuvers and stealing elections. Bear with me just a minute. Got a couple little last minute things to get together before we get the cameras on. Dropping the link to Mario, studio lights, all that good stuff. So, All right, good morning, everybody. I say good morning. What? There, okay. Whew. For a second there, I thought we were going to get kicked back out and have to reboot everything. Patrick Brown, good morning. Patrick says, I hope everyone is buying bread, milk, toilet paper, and beer for the weekend. Looks like we're in for an ugly ice storm. It does indeed look that way. In fact, I'm a little extra concerned about it because I've got a couple of contracts on Friday that just might not be happening this week. So we'll see what happens there. I can't wait for the weather to warm up a little more and start getting a little more work done. Sergeant Major says Oregon is under significant pressure about their election fraud. I have not looked at Oregon yet today. That might be a good one to kind of dovetail into this morning's conversation. Let me see what I can find real quick. Oregon election system. Okay. Yeah, that headline, that fits right into what we're talking about this morning. So, here's the thesis. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you what I told you, right? So, here's the thesis. In 2020, the Democrats clearly and obviously stole the election. And we noticed. Now, the fact is, there have been no consequences, no real consequences, criminally, civilly, what have you, over the Democrats clearly and obviously stealing the election in 2020. And I'll make that case as well. But there is a very real political consequence, and that is that in some places, in some states, like in Georgia, for example, while the GOP hasn't done nearly enough, and you should all be outraged at your GOP reps, all of them, for dropping the ball on securing elections. I mean, here we are 6 years later, and they are still screwing that up. But the fact is that there have been some moves, and Donald Trump is making some moves to try and shore up the elections. And we're not talking about the, what did they use? Fortify. We're not talking about fortifying the elections so that Republicans always win. As much as I would like to see that be the case, that Republicans never lose another election ever, we at least theoretically want to win those elections legitimately, right? The Democrats aren't interested in legitimate elections. So now that it's become clear that the American people are a little more keyed in, a little more aware that the Democrats will in fact steal an election absolutely, literally every time they have an opportunity, they've decided that they're just going to abolish them. De facto and by fiat, they're just going to abolish elections. So let me make the case. Hello? Are you guys hearing weird audio out there? Yep, there it is. I found it. There's a stuttering video trying to play in the background on one of these articles. Bear with me while I try to identify that and eliminate it. Okay, that should solve the problem right there. Okay. I was not able to find the video that's running that was making those little pops of sound in the background. So it's still running somewhere. But it's not making noise anymore. At least it shouldn't be. So you guys in the chat, let me know if that's still coming through. Worst case scenario, I have to close a bunch of tabs until we get rid of it. So let me know in the chat, because it's not in my studio monitor anymore. So I think I eliminated it. So here's what's happening. Virginia just went completely off the rails. Okay. And I'll get to that in a second. First, I made the claim that the 2020 election was clearly and obviously stolen. Now, we all saw the lines go and then flip, right? We all saw the articles. We all saw the claims. Oh, we have to stop counting votes in the middle of the night, and we're going to come back in the morning and finish counting. We all saw the obvious play where, for the first time ever, well, at least in living memory, right? 200 years ago, yeah, votes had to be moved by horse and buggy to a central location, and it took time to count, et cetera, et cetera. But not in your lifetimes until 2020, with the exception of the hanging chads controversy, which isn't really legitimately an exception. We vote. We have election day. And no later than the next morning, we know who won the White House. We know who the president is going to be. Right? Sergeant Major says we all must turn out to vote in the midterms. I agree. And I don't know that it's going to be enough. So we'll get back to that in a minute. Following the 2020 election, of course, you all remember there was a massive wave of censorship that swept the internet, and we weren't allowed to say the 2020 election was stolen. Obviously, I've said it several times this morning, the 2020 election absolutely was stolen, right? No intelligent person believes differently. Literally every person out there who believes that the 2020 election was safe and secure, free and fair, that it was a legitimate election. These are all people who still believe in the Russia hoax. They're people who believe that Jussie Smollett was assaulted in the streets. They're people who believe Bubba Wallace was attacked with a noose. Right? And like I said yesterday, people who still buy into conspiracy theories like the Russia hoax, Bubba Wallace, Jussie Smollett, Mattress Girl, there are hundreds of these hoaxes, right? Good people on both sides, fine people on both sides, whatever, right? Anybody who still the piss tape hoax, right? The people who still believe it was a free and fair election in 2020 are the people who believe some number of those hoaxes. And you will be hard pressed to find one who doesn't believe in several of them. And like I said yesterday, to be clear, these are the kind of people who believe in flat earth theory. Now, let me correct that slightly. I am not saying that everybody who believes the 2020 election was stolen also believes in flat earth theory. What I am saying is that those two beliefs are similarly discredited. I am saying it is, in fact, I would go so far as to say it is almost more reasonable to believe that the earth is flat than it is to believe in the list of sociopathic leftist hoaxes. Right? Now, what is incontrovertible is that in each case of those leftist hoaxes, there was in fact a conspiracy to forward the hoax. The Russia hoax, for example, That was a conspiracy funded through Hillary Clinton's election campaign, laundered through Perkins Coie law firm, and participated in by, at a minimum, the Clinton election campaign, the Clinton Foundation, Perkins Coie, and the entire Democrat National Party. Okay? And similarly, each of the two impeachments against Donald Trump were perpetrated on hoaxes which were backed by a massive conspiracies which included the participation of the primary dinosaur mainstream media. Right? These were psychological operations. These were political operations. These were campaigns to defraud the American people, conspiracies to defraud the American people. Right? Well, I'll give them this. This next one is not entirely a conspiracy to defraud. It is more a conspiracy to simply abolish elections. Now, there's more going on in Virginia than merely abolishing elections. So we're going to take a look at some things that just mind-blowing. This is over the last 48 hours. Dems were cutting prison sentences, cutting hand ballot recounts, banning gas mowers, and so much more. They're literally making it illegal to hand count ballots. That's one of those like the question of voter ID. Oh, we don't need voter ID. Voter ID is racist because black people don't know what the DMV is. Voter ID is racist because black people don't know how to operate computers. You know, every time you hear that, legitimately, the response should be, I'm not concerned if black people vote. I'm concerned that hostile foreign invaders who are not lawfully present in this country vote. Yes, there's some overlap. There is such a thing as a black person who is also a hostile foreign invader, right? They're not all Mexicans, contrary to the popular belief of your champagne socialists who are scared to death that you're going to deport their gardener and their nanny and their toilet sweeper. But the concern is not that black people will vote. The maneuver is not to disenfranchise heritage American blacks. It'd be great to see them vote, especially now, because guess what? Black fatigue is real. And a big chunk of that black fatigue is black Americans who are tired of being robbed by Somali invaders. That's a real thing going on in this country right now. Believe it or not, there's a whole lot of black men out there who are going to vote GOP in the next election, whether you court them or not, because they're tired of just being ripped off by Somalis and Haitians and whatever third world nonsense that it's been that we've been importing into this country for the last 5 years. I know it's been going on much longer than that, but the spike was in the Biden administration, and the spike was outrageous. So in Virginia, what they're doing, less than 48 hours after Democrat Abigail Spanberger was sworn in as Virginia governor on Saturday, her leftist comrades pushed a slew of new laws aimed at raising taxes, enabling stolen elections, and elevating the welfare of illegal aliens over the safety of U.S. citizens. That is not hyperbole. Let's get down to the list. I think I've got the list in two different places. This is not one of them. Okay. So I'll read you the list from here. Dude, I got to scroll back up to it. That's the census stuff. Census. Where the hell is the list, guys? I got a bunch. Okay. There's a list of some like 50 things that they did, but here are the big ones. They introduced legislation to prohibit manual ballot counting. Okay. I was an election observer in 2020 at several different precincts observing the hand recount. It was useless. It was useless. You had a bunch of poll workers, mostly Democrats, right? And when I say that, like I remember arguing with some of the people working at the polls about what they were wearing, because most of them were wearing things like Carter Center T-shirts, things that were just barely not overtly political branding. And of course, if you tried to walk in wearing a MAGA hat, they stopped you at the door. You're not allowed to wear partisan political attire in that situation. And the fact is that all of the Democrats were wearing something signaling them as Dems. Right, the Carter Center had a huge presence there, the Jimmy Carter Center, and there was no pushback on them wearing their equivalent of the "I'm with her" buttons and all that stuff. But God, no, you'd have been shot trying to walk in a MAGA hat, right? I had a MAGA hat. They stopped me at the door, maybe go put it back in my pick-em-up truck, and I said, "Okay, cool." And then I got inside, and I was hopping mad because I'm surrounded by people wearing political slogans that are pro-left. Right, that was in Rockdale County. The other things they're doing is cutting prison sentences, including for violent criminals. The next thing they're going to do, they haven't done it in this tranche, but I promise you this. The next thing that's going to happen, you're going to see people like this, what's this, Schellenberger? You're going to see people like Mamdani. They're going to let the criminals out of prisons, and then they're going to vacate their convictions so that they no longer have felon status. They want the least mentally stable people they can get to be voting, because it is low time preference, low forecasting, low stability people who vote Democrat, right? If you ever doubted that, if you ever doubt that it is primarily crazies that vote Democrat, just look at what is happening in Minnesota right now. A blue state, every blue state in 2026 is essentially a murder riot waiting to pop off. Right? New York is just a bunch of commie murder hobos in suits now. And everybody who doesn't fit that description is trying to sell whatever property they have and get the hell out of the state. Or at least take up a secondary residence outside of the state for enough of the year to evade the taxes of the state. Right? There are going to be some stable geniuses that stick around to keep making money. But I'm telling you, brothers, there's not enough money in this world to convince me to go and live among that madness. Right? I saw some videos yesterday, a little off topic, but just barely. And I wish I could remember the guy's name. He was an independent reporter. He was in Philadelphia, and he was on a public bus. And this psychopath lefty ran up and started screaming at him and badgering him with, "You're a white supremacist. Oh, you support Donald Trump. You're a Nazi. You're a racist. You're this. You're that." Right? And all the kind of normal stuff that you expect to hear out of one of these spiteful mutants. And then she sprayed him in the face with pepper spray. Homeboy was just standing there taking it, just listening to, okay, whatever. And like I said, independent journalist. He had his cameraman with him who was filming at the time, who filmed the interaction, and she sprayed him in the face twice with pepper spray. And to his credit, God, I wish I could remember the guy's name. I'd love to give him a shout out. Maybe I'll look him up after the show and do a blast out on Twitter or something to, do my bit for the cause there. But she blasted him in the face with the pepper spray, and then she pulled the emergency stop and got off the bus and ran away, right? And he sat down and he pounded his hands on his knees and he laughed. He's that's twice today. And like the interview I saw him doing, the interviewer whose name Tate Brown. He was interviewed on the Timcast show middle of the day yesterday. Tate Brown said, and we saw you, man, just like an absolute giga Chad. You just took the pepper spray. And, as I saw that, I thought to myself, I thought about my life and where I'm at right now and the things that I would like to do. And I find myself here. I know I can take some pepper spray to the face and keep on fighting. Right. And that's not bravado. I think I'm a big tough man. I spent a career in the U.S. Army, and one of the things we did to train, right, when I was the training and operations non-commissioned officer in charge of a special intelligence operating unit, I used to take my soldiers and put a 100-pound rucksack on them. Yes, the Army standard is usually 60 pounds, but we have to carry specialized radio equipment, so we had to train with heavier bags. We would ruck march the 10 miles from our compound out to the gas chamber on base. We would drop our packs, and we would go into the gas chamber. And because it was time-consuming and aggravating to check out the gas masks, we weren't going in there to train on using the gas mask protective equipment. We were going in there to train against the possibility of being hit with tear gas, in particular, unprepared. We did this several times. What did we do? We went into the gas chamber. We popped a CS canister, right, a gas grenade in the closed chamber with the ventilation off, and we did jumping jacks, and we did push-ups, and we sang the Army song, and we did some more jumping jacks, and then we turned on the ventilation, opened the door, and walked back out into the fresh air with snot, tears, and the awfulness. And a lot of guys would vomit, and y'all. If you can't do 100 push-ups while singing the Army song in a room full of CS gas, are you even a soldier? I mean, damn, son. So I'm confident. I'm not saying it wouldn't hurt. I'm not saying it wouldn't suck, but I'm confident I could take that spicy sauce to the face like that and rock out, do what needed to be done. I'm confident I could go in and do the independent journalism thing and be relatively safe because I have the training and the experience to deal with hostile crisis situations. And there's a big part of me, right? And don't misunderstand what I'm saying here. This isn't one of those, man, I wish I'd have been there. I'd have done something. No, there's a big part of me that sees everything that's going on right now. And the truth is, I'd be a great fit to go do the independent journalism piece. I could probably make a good bit of money doing it. I could even probably be relatively safe doing it. And I'm interested in doing it. And all that's true. But I moved my family out to the country, out to the middle of nowhere, away from the dense cities. So there is a logistical challenge just in making the trip into one of these shithole cities to do that kind of reporting. And a big part of the reason I did that is because now I have a wife and I have a bunch of kids, and I promised my wife, like I had to turn down a very high paying contractor job to hunt pirates in Djibouti several years ago because the wife didn't want me to disappear into the desert again for another year and leave her doing the single mom thing, like when I deployed to Afghanistan. So, we had a long conversation about that because it was a shitload of money. It was. I could have bought 3 of the properties that I'm living on right now. Paid cash and still had cash in the bank. It was a pile of fucking money, but it was also 6 months to a year away again, and I can make money here. It's okay. It's okay. And that I tell you the truth, that kind of sticks in my craw a little bit because younger, less responsible, not yet daddy me absolutely would have done some crazy shit like that. I mean, I had a bit of a thrill seeker streak in me back in the day. Yo, when Katrina went through, I went and stood on the beach and stared into the hurricane because fuck you. And that was actually awesome. We had a lot of beer that night. That was freaking awesome. But we don't do that shit now. Right? Like Ron White said, guys, it's not that the wind is blowing. It's what the wind is a blowing. If you've got a yield sign in your spleen, it doesn't matter how many sit-ups you did that morning. Fair play. Okay, fair play. But I mean, that's the madness that's going on out there right now. So please believe me when I say that your mom Donnie's, your Schellenberg's, your Waltzes, they are going to be, yeah, Sergeant Major says that's why we recruited 17-year-old soldiers. Yeah. I was not 17. Okay. Story time. Right after I graduated high school and had taken the ASVAB, because they give us the ASVAB in high school. I don't know if that's a national thing or if that's just good states thing. I did take the ASVAB when I was getting out of high school, and I maxed it out. Right? I maxed it out again when I did enlist. But when I got out of high school, I would find myself driving around in town, going to a friend's house or something, and more than once, I turned into a cul-de-sac to turn around, or had parked on a cul-de-sac, and I got in my van and went to turn around because I had that Dodge conversion van. And recruiters, 2 cars with recruiters in it, would pull up and block the cul-de-sac and stop me from leaving. And they'd get out and they'd come and talk to me about joining the Army. And they'd tell me how impressed they were with my ASVAB and all this stuff. And I thought, and for a long time there, I thought I was pretty hot shit. I was like, wow, the Army really wants me to join the Army. Like, I must be a rare creature. Okay, I am. But maxing out the ASVAB by itself is not all that entirely unheard of. It wasn't until probably 5 or 6 years later, maybe 7 years. It wasn't until later, after I was, I enlisted when I was 24, about to turn 25. So, right. So I was an old soldier when I finally did enlist. It wasn't until I enlisted on my own without a recruiter coming to talk to me. I just one day said, okay, I'm tired of what I'm doing here. I'm bored, and I'd like to go kill commies, so I'm going to go join the Army when I was in my mid-20s. It wasn't until then that I learned that my father, who at the time was the sergeant major in charge of the MEPS in Atlanta, he was big balls in the Army recruiting command, specifically in recruiting at the time. Had just straight up told a bunch of recruiters in the Atlanta area that he would hand them a cash bonus if they got me to enlist. And I found that fucking hilarious. It's Willow Bar said, like it's hard. Yes. That's right. That's my wife also maxed out the ASFAB. That's it's what we do, baby. It's what we do. So that's a lot of off topic. Let me get back around to this. So, that's not the same one we on. So anyway, in Virginia, they're getting rid of hand counting ballots. They're actually criminalizing hand counting ballots. That's psychotic. And let's not mix words about it. Without exception, every time you see a Democrat, especially a Democrat, right? I would say also Republicans, but you don't see it with Republicans. So a Democrat propose a measure which weakens the security of an election. They will couch it in terms of making elections more accessible to the less adequate. I don't like to call them the less fortunate. They're not less fortunate. They're less adequate. Then what you're seeing is an attempt to make elections easier to corrupt. Counting illegal aliens in the census. Not requiring proof of citizenship to vote. Obstructing ICE operations to remove hostile foreign invaders from our sovereign territory. Declaring sanctuary city policies and enticing immigrants to come in, hostile foreign invaders, illegal immigrants, to come and live in their areas. In 2020, there was a push by Republicans who just gave up the ghost, just surrendered, much like they're doing today. There was a push to add the citizenship question to the census. Like most of you, it had not even occurred to me at the time that question was not on the census. That's insane. Understand what the census does, right? Every 10 years, there shall be a counting of the people, right? Decadally, we will determine the distribution of the citizenry, for the purpose of the apportionment of representation and the logistic distribution of resources from the federal government. What does that mean? That means that if you're not counting citizens, you're just counting people to include hostile foreign invaders. That places like California, New York, etc., are getting more resources than the law provides for them to acquire at the expense of the American taxpayer. You'll remember the SALT conversation that we had before, right? The special and local tax exemptions, or state and local tax exemptions, the SALT exemptions. So what happens with that? The reason that was a question in controversy is places like California and New York, they pay excruciatingly high state income taxes, the highest in the country, and then their citizens get to deduct those taxes, those state and local taxes, from their federal income tax, right? But then, as we've detailed with the conversation around healthcare, the state gets the tax money that it spends in its state on things like providing free healthcare to illegal aliens. That money gets reimbursed out of the federal coffers, which means that Californians aren't paying for it. Georgians are, Tennesseans are, Kentuckians, Carolinians, Texans. It means that if you're in a red state, you are subsidizing the blue states. So they tax their people extraordinarily. They take a huge chunk of the income from their citizens in New York, California, Illinois, places like the blue states. And they love to tell us, oh, well, we pay more in federal tax. No, they don't. That's a fucking lie. They pay more up front as an average because they have the billionaires and they count those guys in there. It's kind of like the whole gender pay gap thing. They say, oh, well, women only make 77 cents on the dollar for every dollar that a man makes. You can only arrive at that number if you take the work of all men and take an average there, and then take the average of all women and take the average there. And when you realize that the category of all men includes all the billionaires, and the category of all women includes almost zero billionaires. Oh, it's not that men and women, it's not that there's actually a disparity in pay. It's that you've got 3 or 4 guys up at the tippy top that blow out the average for everybody, right? They're the nerdy kid in the corner that fucks up the curve for the rest of the classroom. Sergeant Major says you are conflagrating. He meant conflating your issues. SALT and Medicare are separate scams. No, they're not. Because here's what. So let me lay that out for you, Dad. They pay a disproportionately high state and local income tax. They deduct that from the federal taxes that they pay, and then quite separately, yes, they get their Medi-Cal, their Medicare California, right, as one example. Their Medi-Cal gets reimbursed by the federal government, right? So what's happening? Because money is fungible, right? Money is fungible. These two scams work together. So they end up paying less into the federal coffers, and then that gets laundered back into their state system through the Medicare funding. Okay, so they're basically, if we were talking about a business instead of a government, it would look very much like a laundering and embezzlement scheme. Instead, it's just a laundering and fraud scheme. So the two, if I grant your premise that yes, okay. My point was not to say that the two of them are the same scam. They are two parts of the same conspiracy to defraud the American taxpayer. They are two separate scams in a group of scams that work in tandem to siphon money out of every other state in the nation. And every blue state is running a scam like that. Is that more neatly packaged, I guess? I'm not frustrated. I'm not frustrated with you, Dad. I'm frustrated with I'm frustrated about trying to package it more coherently. Because I think we're talking past each other on that now. I'm not sure that we disagree. I think we're saying the same thing two different ways. So I'm going to put a pin in that one and not blow too much time on it, too much more air on it. So let me get to this other piece, because I actually have quite a bit of. Okay, go ahead and pop this up real quick. I said earlier that it is no longer a statement in controversy that the 2020 election was stolen. Inside the Fulton County 315,000 vote controversy. You've all heard, oh, it's just 11,000 votes. Find me the 11,000 votes. That's and that has been incorrectly and uncharitably treated to sound as if Donald Trump insisted that Kemp go out and steal the election on his behalf, which is not what happened. it was very clear that what happened in Georgia, in Fulton County especially, with the hoax, yes, the hoax, that a water main burst inside the counting facility and they had to stop counting for that reason. We now know incontrovertibly, this is no longer a question, that there was no water main break. That fact alone should be enough to convince an intelligent person that something shady happened there. Right? And that something shady happened there is plenty of reason to suspect that Georgia, which went overwhelmingly for Donald Trump in 2016, was not likely to go for Biden in 2020. But somehow, Biden just barely squeaked it out. And Georgia was one of a handful of states that was considered to be a swing state in that election, without which there were a half a dozen states in that election, without which Joe Biden would have lost. If Georgia had not gone to Biden, Trump wins. Right? Danny says it was a toilet that overflowed at 9:30 a.m. fixed in an hour. Yeah, see, Danny, I've heard that, and I've seen the work order, and that never made sense to me. That always bothered me. That just made it worse because you had a toilet overflow at 9:30 in the morning. How does that become a narrative about a water main bursting at 2:00 the next morning? Right? What 17 hours later? Fuck you. Right? Not you, Danny, the sociopaths that try to feed us that line of bullshit. Well, now Fulton County told the state election board that required signatures were missing from some tabulator receipt tapes tied to about 315,000 early votes cast in 2020. The county said the votes themselves were properly cast and counted, but documentation rules were not followed. Right? Okay, these two statements cannot exist simultaneously. The county said the votes themselves were properly cast and counted, but documentation rules were not followed. In order for the votes to be properly cast and counted, the documentation rules must have been followed. If the documentation rules were not followed, then the statement, the votes were properly cast and counted, is a lie. It could even be the case that the votes were properly cast, but it is not possible for the votes to have been counted without having followed the documentation rules. That's not an option. Hey, I made chocolate chip cookies. Oh, great. That's awesome. Hey, there's no chocolate chips in these. Well, I followed the recipe, so they're chocolate chip cookies. I tell you what, you take this cookie and tell your 6-year-old that it's a chocolate chip cookie and see how that works out for you. You're lying. It's a lie. So, and I don't want to beleaguer that one for too long. The point is that this bit of information, entirely separate from any other argument about court cases, about Dominion machines, about multiple jurisdictional questions, none of that matters anymore to the question of whether or not the 2020 election was stolen. That there were 315,000 votes that were illegally processed to determine the outcome of the election in the state of Georgia alone, by itself vitiates the entire question of validity of the 2020 election. Joe Biden was not elected president. It's that simple. Right? Now, given that it is no longer a question in controversy that the 2020 election was stolen, Well, the Democrats know something. They know that across the country, there are GOP state senates and houses of representatives, et cetera, who are trying to shore up the elections and prevent another 2020. So they've decided that they're just gonna quit. They're just gonna stop having elections. So, ahead of 2026 election, as of January 2026, 3 states were considering voluntary redistricting ahead of the 2026 U.S. House elections. Of 5 states, California, Missouri, North Carolina, Ohio, and Texas, had passed a new congressional map. Other Republican states then also weighed redistricting efforts. And then we get to several Democratic states considered countering with redistricting of their own, including California, Maryland, New York, etc. And Virginia also considering redistricting. And there's I forget the one. It's not in this article. There's one, I think was it Maine? One of these states just gerrymandered away their very last Republican seat. So what's happening right now is there are several states like California, Maryland, New York, etc., who have already been gerrymandered to hell and back, but now they're going out of their way to gerrymander it so that there are no more Republicans from their states. I think they said they're 2 states away right now from essentially having gerrymandered away the Republican seat in enough blue states that come the midterms, unless the Republicans similarly gerrymander away every Democrat. Sergeant Major points out Maine. Yeah, that's right. Maine only has 3 seats. Damn it. I don't remember who it was. I read it earlier, and I've read so many damn articles this morning to prep this show that I lost that one. Anyway, red states need to gerrymander away every Democrat seat. But Chris, that sounds like yes, it does. Yes, it does. They are abolishing your elections, right? In Virginia just joined the national what's called the National Popular Vote cohort. Blue states are creating a cohort called a conspiracy. Blue states are conspiring together in what's called the National Popular Vote cohort, where they all promise each other that no matter what their states vote in a national election, that they will give all their electoral college votes to the winner of the popular vote. And that sounds good because because land doesn't vote, people vote. And so yeah, California obviously should shut the fuck up. You know what's happening in California? Remember the wildfires? You know how that happened? Because the people in the city have an outsized vote in the state and voted to route the water away from the farmers so that they could have more hot showers, essentially. They voted to reroute the water into the cities instead of into the farms. And the result? The water wasn't going anywhere it was supposed to go because a Democrat cannot help but destroy everything it touches. It really is that simple. So if they manage to do this, to take the House without that's what they're doing. They're trying to take the House without an election. Right? There will still be an election, but they will have gerrymandered it into essentially the state will have decided that it will be a blue wave from the state. Our current majority in the House and the Senate is extremely narrow. Extremely narrow. It's not going to take much political chicanery for the Democrats to effectively run a coup and take over the government. they only have to fuck us out of 2 or 3 seats. And understand this. If we animate every conservative voter to go out and vote, and we win every seat that is under contest that could be flipped red, and retain all of the seats that we currently have, if we do not gerrymander away every possibly eliminated blue seat in every red state, the Democrats are going to win the midterms by simply having deleted red representatives from their individual states. That's where we're at right now. I still say get out and vote. Right? I'm still making Pascal. I'm still running on Pascal's bargain, Pascal's wager. Right? I've explained that before, but basically, it is either the case that voting matters or it doesn't matter. So if I don't vote and I'm right, I gain nothing. If I don't vote and I'm wrong, I lose nothing. Right? That's if I wager that the vote is meaningless, that the vote is completely corrupted and I can't win. If I bet on that and I believe that voting doesn't matter and not voting doesn't matter because I cannot win, and I can't if I can't win, then I've got nothing to lose because I'm losing everything anyway. Right? So that's column 1. Don't believe in God. And you either cease to exist and there's nothing after death, or you go to hell. Or there's column A, where if I'm wrong, nothing happens. I cease to exist when I die. But if I'm right, and voting matters, then to not vote is to risk everything. Okay, Pascal's theory of the vote is a Lowry original bastardization of Pascal's wager, which has to do with faith in God. So Danny says overcome the cheat and vote. That's my point, Danny. They're not cheating. They're just straight up. They're not pretending like there's an election that matters. They're just straight up deleting them. They're just straight up removing the vote. It's that simple. All right, I've been going on long enough. I need to go ahead and put a pin in this one and get on down the road. Thanks for watching this morning, guys. We love you. Y'all be safe out there. We love you, and we will see you tomorrow.